Hello and welcome back to Wicked Mysterious. I'm your host, Danie, and today I bring you episode 18 of season 2. For today's housekeeping, if you missed our post on Facebook, we're going to continue episodes every 2 weeks for the month of July 2024. I am attempting to make these episodes longer, but it's hard when you talk fast and you're talking to yourself. But in August, we will take our summer break. And then we will resume normal episodes with Katie in September. So that's our plan. Also, if you didn't know, you can send us fan mail using the text us link in the description of the episode in whatever podcast app you use. Today's fan mail comes to us from Texas, and it says, "Love your podcast. Need a lot of new episodes ASAP. Keep up the awesome job. You help me get through my long work day." So thank you so much to whoever you are out there in Texas. I also launched my own business website. It's called Hypnagogia. You can find it at hypna-gogia.com. That's hypna-gogia.com. And I have opened the waiting list for my manifestation course, which is coming soon. So with all of that out of the way, let's get into the mystery, shall we? Bob Lazar is considered to be a conspiracy theorist who claims to have been hired by the U.S. government to reverse engineer extraterrestrial spacecraft in the late 1980s. He claims to have worked in a section of Area 51 known as S4. Mysteriously, Lazar's involvement in these classified activities, as well as his prior jobs in education, have been completely erased from any record, both public and private. Lazar's involvement in the 1990s with illicit criminal activity involving prostitution further people's disbelief in the story. Was Bob Lazar actually a UFO engineer working for a top-secret government program, or is he a pathological con man? Let's get into it. First, I'm going to go through the timeline of Bob's life, what he says happened, and what information is verifiable. And then from there, we'll get into his claims on extraterrestrial intelligence. He was born on January 26, 1959 in Coral Gables, Florida. This is not able to be verified for two reasons. One is that only Bob or a legal representative of Bob is allowed to get a copy of his birth certificate according to Florida state law. The second reason is that Bob was adopted, which muddies the waters on his early life. This birth date, however, is listed on his later marriage license. In 1974, a Social Security card is issued in New York State for Robert Lazar. 2 years later, Bob graduates from high school in Long Island. He graduated 261 out of 369 students, making it very unlikely that he went to Caltech or MIT as he claims. Bob claims he moved on to attend Caltech and remembered a professor by the name of Duxler. However, Bob also claims to have gone to Pierce College, which was confirmed by both the school itself as well as a Professor Duxler, who remembered Bob taking one of his math or physics classes. Duxler never worked at Caltech. Bob mostly took electronics classes at Pierce College and did not graduate. In 1978, he claims to have received a degree in physics from Pacifica University. The school was caught selling degrees and was shut down that same year by the state of California. He says he attended both Cal State and Caltech in 1977 or 1978. There is some argument as to whether or not he attended Cal State. The library at Caltech, however, keeps a copy of every yearbook from every year, and the yearbooks from 1977 through 1982 were checked, and there was not a single photo or mention of a Robert Lazar, with the exception of one student with the same name who graduated with a degree in business, but his photo proved to be a completely different person. On July 27, 1980, Bob marries his first wife, Carol, who is 13 years his senior. Bob's occupation is listed as electronics engineer, and Carol's was electronics technician, and both have the highest grade completed as 12. They are listed as living in Canoga Park, California. Bob claims to have earned a master's degree from MIT around 1982. Many people think it's suspicious that he could not immediately recall the exact year of graduation from such a prestigious school. But of course, there is no record at all of Bob at MIT, no archives, no student directories, and no degree list include Lazar. The registrar's office and alumni office also have no record of him either. If Bob is telling the truth, how would the government remove all traces of Bob, even from yearbooks at Caltech? Is it just a coincidence that Bob was never pictured in any of these yearbooks? Sometime in late 1981 or early 1982, Bob and his wife moved to Los Alamos, New Mexico. A front-page article was written in the Los Alamos Monitor about Bob's Honda Jet car. Bob is pictured with his car that sports the license plate Jet You Bet. The article says that Bob is, quote, a physicist at the Los Alamos Mason Physics Facility. It explains that the jet car Bob has made runs on liquid propane for up to 50 seconds and, quote, the jet cannot get the car going from a dead stop, end quote. So Bob must drive the car normally up until 90 miles per hour. Bob was also quoted as saying that this is the most efficient jet engine available. A standard jet uses 6 pounds of fuel for every pound of thrust, and Lazar said he uses 1.3 pounds of fuel for every pound of thrust. In October 1982, Bob's name does appear in the telephone directory for the Los Alamos National Laboratory, but by February 1983, his name had been removed from the listing. Bob and his wife open a photo processing business. Throughout 1984 and 1985, Bob begins borrowing large sums of money from both his parents as well as various banks and 5-minute loan companies. These are detailed in his later bankruptcy filings in 1986. Some sources say that Bob and Carol invested in a New Mexico brothel that was so lucrative that Bob did not need to seek out full-time employment for some time. However, he did not pay back his debts, and multiple cars were repossessed. Prior to the bankruptcy filing, they purchased a home in Las Vegas, and Carol moved there while Bob stayed in Los Alamos. On April 19, 1986, Bob marries Tracy Merck in a Las Vegas wedding chapel. At this time, he was still married to Carol, and there were no records of any divorce proceedings. Just 2 days later, on April 21, 1986, Carol died in her home in Las Vegas. Both her obituary and her death certificate listed Bob as her husband. The coroner's report said, quote, husband reports finding the victim as described this date at 7:30 a.m. following his return from out of state. Husband reports talking to the decedent by telephone Saturday, April 19, 1986. Husband states that they have had marital difficulties, that the deceased has talked of suicide, end quote. The police report said, on April 21, 1986, at approximately 7:35 a.m., Bob Lazar arrived at his residence after being gone for the weekend. Upon entry to the residence, he heard a vehicle running in the garage. He went into the garage, found his wife apparently deceased in the garage. He then turned off the vehicle and contacted medical and police personnel who responded. Bob Lazar stated that he was out of town pursuing his occupation as a race car driver. When he returned home today, he found his wife deceased. A note was found inside the house, and it basically says that she is tired of it. She wants no big funeral, no flowers, cremation. It said, I did it by myself, and was signed Carol Lazar. Bob later said that Carol had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and no longer wanted to live. Her cause of death was officially listed as suicide by inhalation of motor vehicle exhaust. Within days, Bob and Tracy move into the Las Vegas home. Weird. July 1986 is when Bob files for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. Curiously, in his finding, he lists the death of a spouse and loss of business as his reasons, and he also writes that he has had no other employment for the past 6 years besides his photo processing lab. He does not even mention working at Los Alamos National Laboratory and does not mention the investment in the brothel. Prior to their wedding, Tracy, his second wife, was charged with forgery in December 1985 and received probation. She was not supposed to leave the state of New Mexico, so she married Bob a second time under the false name Jackie Diane Evans. This second marriage was in another Las Vegas chapel. In 1988, they lose the Las Vegas home and buy another house nearby under Tracy's fake name, Jackie. In June 1988, Bob meets John Lear with his friend Gene Huff. I took this short blurb from Coast to Coast AM's biography on Gene Huff. It says, quote, Gene Huff moved from Las Vegas in 1979 and then met Bob Lazar in the mid-1980s. He has owned a real estate appraisal business for the past 25 years. He knew Bob Lazar before, during, and after he was in the Flying Disc Reverse Engineering program at S4. He wrote the videotape, the Lazar tape, and excerpts from the government Bible, and co-produced it with Bob. He also wrote the screenplay S4, The Bob Lazar Story, which has been twice optioned by Hollywood studios but has not yet been made. He also co-owned Tri-Dot Productions with Bob and produced the Desert Blast Summer Fireworks, Guns, and Explosives Blowout for 10 years with Bob before he moved to New Mexico a few years ago, end quote. And John Lear was a UFO activist who was vocal about the U.S. government's involvement in a cover-up. So since Gene was an appraiser, he asks John if he can appraise his home in exchange for all of his UFO research materials. Some of these materials included information from Billy Meyer, who was a famous contactee of the beings from the Palladian star system. John agrees to have his house appraised, and Gene brings Bob along as his assistant. Bob Lazar claims that he was hired to work at S4, a facility near Area 51, through a somewhat unconventional process. He has stated that he had a background in science and technology, claiming to have degrees from MIT and Caltech. However, again, there is no verifiable evidence of his attendance at these institutions, which has led to skepticism about his academic credentials. He also claims that he worked at Los Alamos National Laboratory in New Mexico. This background would be perfect for a candidate being recruited to work at S4. According to Lazar, he was recommended for the job at S4 by Dr. Edward Teller, who was a prominent physicist known as the father of the hydrogen bomb. Lazar says he met Teller at a scientific conference where they had a short conversation. Teller supposedly later recommended Lazar when the government was looking for scientists to work on secretive projects. Lazar claims he underwent a series of interviews and security clearances before being hired. These interviews reportedly involved his scientific knowledge, personal background, and potential loyalty. Once hired, he was allegedly subjected to extreme secrecy and compartmentalization. He stated that he was given limited information and access, only enough to perform his specific tasks related to reverse engineering extraterrestrial technology. He describes his initial impressions of S4, including the underground facilities and the advanced technology he encountered. He claims that he was briefed on the nature of the work and the extraterrestrial origin of the technology. Lazar stated that S4 was located near Papoose Lake, about 15 miles south of the main Area 51 facility. He claimed that the facility was being built into the side of a mountain and having hangar doors that blend into the natural landscape. He claimed that he saw 9 flying saucers, UFOs in total, that were being stored at S4. He described one of the craft as being powered by a highly advanced propulsion system using a substance he referred to as element 115 or moscovium. This element allegedly enables the craft to generate gravity waves for propulsion, which allows it to manipulate space and time. The propulsion system of the UFOs involves amplifying and directing gravity waves. He detailed that the craft used gravity amplifiers and a reactor powered by element 115. His job was to understand and reverse engineer the alien technology. He claimed that the scientists at S4 were tasked with replicating the advanced technology found in these extraterrestrial craft. He said that the materials used in the crafts were unknown and highly advanced. Bob claims to have seen briefing documents while working at the S4 facility that outlined information about the origins and nature of the extraterrestrial beings. These documents allegedly stated that the beings were from a planet orbiting the binary star system known as Zeta Reticuli. You might remember Zeta Reticuli from our Betty and Barney Hill episode. The Hills were driving home late one night in New Hampshire when they claimed that they were abducted by gray aliens. When Betty asked these beings where they were from, she was shown a map, which she subsequently drew after the whole ordeal was over. The map she drew was later identified as that of Zeta Reticuli. This star system is located approximately 39 light-years from Earth. It is a wide binary star system in the southern constellation of Reticulum. It consists of two sun-like stars, Zeta Reticuli 1 and Zeta Reticuli 2. But Bob did not specify which of the two stars the being's planet orbited. He mentioned that these beings were referred to as the Greys, a type of extraterrestrial commonly described in UFO lore. He said that these beings were small with large heads and eyes, fitting the description of the typical gray alien. Briefing documents he read suggested a detailed study of the biology and technology of these beings. However, he did not claim to have seen any extraterrestrial beings himself. He did claim to have seen 9 flying saucers, each with different designs. He primarily worked on one particular craft, which he described as having a sleek metallic appearance. He described the interior of the craft as being devoid of sharp angles, with a console that had hand indentations to control the craft. The seats were small, indicating that they were designed for beings much smaller than humans. In 1990, Bob was charged with aiding and abetting a prostitution ring in relation to the brothel. These charges were downgraded to felony pandering, and he received community service and probation, which he completed successfully. In 1991, the Lazar tape and excerpts from the government Bible was released. This tape is one of the earliest detailed presentations of Bob Lazar's story following the initial televised interview with George Knapp in 1989. It was produced to provide more context and elaborate on Lazar's experiences and the scientific principles he claimed to have encountered while working at S4. The briefing document suggested that the beings had been visiting Earth for a long time. He claimed that the extraterrestrial beings, the Greys, believed that humans were containers or vessels of souls. This idea suggests a spiritual or metaphysical aspect to human existence that is of interest to these beings. The documents Lazar allegedly read indicate that these extraterrestrials had a sophisticated understanding of the concept of a soul and its significance. These beings supposedly viewed the human body as a temporary vessel or container for a soul, which could be transferred or reincarnated. The mention of this concept adds a philosophical and metaphysical dimension to his claims. This suggests that the extraterrestrial beings had insights into aspects of our existence that go beyond physical and technological understanding. In June 2019, Bob was interviewed on the Joe Rogan Experience podcast. This is one of the most in-depth and widely viewed discussions with Bob about his claims and experiences. He reiterated his claims about element 115 being the fuel source for the alien spacecraft. This element was synthesized in a laboratory in 2003 but is highly unstable, which Bob did acknowledge. He talked about the personal and professional repercussions of coming forward with his story, including legal troubles and ongoing skepticism. He expressed frustration with the attention and the disbelief that he has faced over the years. During the interview, Lazar mentioned that he was experiencing severe headaches and other health issues, which affected his ability to remember certain details and articulate his story. Joe Rogan, who is known for his inquisitive interviewing style, pressed Lazar on various scientific and logical aspects of his claims. Bob Lazar's interview with Joe Rogan provided an extensive platform for him to recount his experiences working at S4. The interview, alongside Jeremy Corbell's documentary, has played a significant role in keeping Lazar's story alive and continuing the debate over the existence of alien technology and government secrecy. Despite ongoing skepticism, the interview has cemented Lazar's place in UFO lore and has contributed to the broader discussion about ET life and advanced technology. Bob's second wife, Tracy, passed away in a car accident, and he remarried his third and current wife, Joy, in the 90s. Today, Bob operates United Nuclear, a company that sells scientific equipment, supplies, and chemicals. The company caters to hobbyists, educational institutions, and researchers, providing a range of products that include radioactive ores, scientific kits, and educational materials. In 2006, Lazar and his wife Joy were charged with violating the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. They allegedly sold chemicals through their company. These charges specifically involved the sale of restricted chemicals to make illegal fireworks. Lazar pled guilty and was fined, but did not serve time in prison. Robert Lazar's entire life seems to be shrouded in mystery. Let us know in the comments if you think Bob is telling the truth about his experiences working in S4, or send us an email at wickedmysteriouspod@gmail.com. Thanks for listening to Wicked Mysterious. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Stay mysterious.